of Ukraine, and now she is in her new, probably most important capacity as economic advisor to the president of Ukraine, Chrystia Freeland. Floor is yours, and you will represent our participant. Of course, if somebody from them needs any introduction, I don't know, but please, Chrystia, floor is yours.
Okay. Мені навіть не потрібно. Дуже дякую. Добрий день. Bienvenue. Welcome. Wonderful to be here with everyone today. And this is really a star-studded panel. Take a picture of the people here, because when 10 years from now, the Ukrainian economy has doubled in size, it's going to be because of this group of people. And the obverse is also true. So these are seats of high responsibility. As Victor said, it was an intentional choice to start with a panel about the Ukrainian economy. And when you leave here today, I want you to leave with many thoughts. But if you only have room for three, here are the three things I want you to be thinking about. The first one is, quite naturally, with the beginning of the war, with this cruel, illegal, evil, full-scale invasion of Ukraine, we spent some time thinking about Ukraine as a victim and the horrible damage being done to Ukraine. And that was entirely appropriate. But today is a day I want us to start thinking about Ukraine as an opportunity. Ukraine as a European tiger, as an engine of growth for Ukraine, for all of Europe, and for the world. Second thing to think about, we walked through here, Victor and his team did an amazing exhibit of Kyiv fighting the Shaheds. And we have people who have just arrived from Kyiv. It's impossible not to have the military battlefield in the front of our minds. But Ukraine is fighting two wars at once. It is fighting on the military battlefield and on the economic battlefield. And when the war is over, the economic fight will truly be joined. Ukrainian people are fighting, for their sovereignty and their identity, but also for European prosperity. And this group of people are going to talk about that and deliver it. And then the final thing that I would like people to think about, I first lived in Ukraine in 88, 89. And I was there when the Soviet Union collapsed and independent Ukraine emerged. And we saw the miracle of the collapse of the Soviet Union and of EU accession for the countries of Eastern Europe. Their economies tripled in size from 2000 to today. So Ukraine as a European tiger sounds like an unreachable dream, but it's actually something that's happened already. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to start with a great friend of Ukraine, someone who has been doing a huge amount of work on it, the head of the World Bank, Ajay Banga. And to give you a sense of how engaged these guys are in Ukraine, they have a special train that goes to Kyiv every week full of World Bank people. They are there, they're on the ground, and they have been working on a prosperity plan for Ukraine. AJ, what is happening in Ukraine, and what does Ukraine need to do?
So first of all, thanks for having me, and congratulations on your new role. And I'm really glad that, Victor, thank you for getting this set up, and it's a pleasure to be with all of them. Look, I've been in the bank now 2.5 years, and these 2.5 years, the bank has been the primary source of the manner in which money from certain countries in the West and Japan and the like has flowed for purposes of keeping the Ukrainian economy and administration and schools running. So our knowledge base of those people you referred to come and go from there 78 of them are on the ground in Ukraine, and a number of them have been there since the beginning of the war. Some are newer, and so they have a good expertise on what's been going on and what needs to be done. Separately, we put together a panel of experts that consists of some people who are Ukrainians, some who are Europeans, some Canadians, Brits, Americans, Japanese. In fact, somebody who used to work at the EBRD, a Japanese, is also part of our group. And we have a panel report that I'm going to draw on just now to speak about.
Okay, this is, for journalists in the room, it's top secret intelligence. It hasn't been released yet, so.
Come on in.
We just started.
I just started off. She's fresh from Ukraine anyway, so literally a few days ago. So I'd say 4 or 5 things to you, and I'll give it a pause there. The first is, I think the Ukrainian people have got to want what's going to happen in terms of economic change. They have to want to lead this themselves. If you want to benefit the way other East European countries benefited post the change in Europe, their people took ownership of that change and they benefited from it, and their generations after will benefit from it. So I want to say this is actually not us, it is the Ukrainian people who need to take ownership of this completely. Otherwise, it will fail. There are 3 or 4 things that are connected to that. One is the desire to become one day a part of your neighbors in the EU, not just for security reasons, but for the logic of where you are. Geography is everything, and you are where you are. And so connecting to your neighbors for your prosperity and your security is kind of important. And therefore, having the willingness to conduct all that is required to become a part of the EU is going to be very important. Third is that if you want this to grow, to country to grow, you're going to have to grow differently from the Ukraine pre the war. This is actually an opportunity to reinvent that Ukraine in a way that has 3 or 4 characteristics. The first one is Ukraine is blessed with some natural resources: energy, agriculture, minerals and metals. Definitely something to be used. The second is Ukrainians are smart on technology. You've shown that during the war, and you're developing industries that use technology during the war. There's no reason why your future cannot be digital, AI, tech enabled in a way that your population understands and will seize as a benefit. The third is that if you do all this, you have to do it to the private sector. You have to wean yourself off the crutch of state-owned enterprises. That doesn't mean you do it tomorrow morning. It doesn't mean you do all of them tomorrow. It just means you have to open the market up for competitive forces. That is what all these other countries did. You've got to get out of the crutch of SOEs. And so those 3 characteristics, in addition to the ownership of the Ukrainian people, will be important. To enable all this to happen, there are 4 aspects that this report has talked about. And the first one, Kristia, is that we need to have a situation where the private sector can be allowed to succeed. That means infrastructure, the rule of law, fighting corruption, reduce transparency of SOEs, macro fiscal stability, risk guarantees. You get the idea of what's required as the basic foundation for a private sector to win. Then you need to create the other environments for that private sector, including your medium and small scale enterprises that will need the right opportunities. It's not just big companies that should win. You're going to need to get all of these to win if you're going to create jobs for your people and prosperity. You're going to need to create the right implementation of that rule of law. You're going to need to create the right tax reforms, the right reforms in the energy sector, business-friendly reforms to enable that second step to happen. The third is people. You've got a diaspora outside of Ukraine. You need to get them back. That requires certain things to happen. You've got veterans who will come back from the field. You need to provide for them to have a few new life, new skilling. You've got labor laws that need fixing. You've got education and skilling that needs to happen. So that's the third category, people and people skills. And the fourth category is we need to sell all this to investors. People aren't standing outside with buckets of cash saying, oh, I'm just dying to put this to work in country A or country B. There's a lot of places where money can go. You've got to be willing to be in the front few of that queue so that money comes your way. And that requires you to sell as much and communicate as much as it is to believe that people want you to win, given your history of the last few years. So that's the way I think about that report and how I think about what we can do in the coming period.
Okay, excellent. And I hope you have realized, Ajay, you are here in part as the beginning of the great Ukrainian sales campaign.
Find a new salesman.
I think we're done. On the tech point, I'm going to just say a little tiny story about it. So there are a lot of Ukrainian refugees in Canada right now. And on Saturday, they go to Ukrainian school with my children and other Canadian-born Ukrainian children. And the Ukrainians from Ukraine who have just arrived in Canada, who send their kids to Canada's excellent schools, have set up extra for Ukrainians only math classes because they believe that the Ukrainians are so much better at math than the Canadian children that they don't want them to lose their math excellence while they're in Canada. So that tells you something actually about the level of education, and maybe we Canadians need to pull our socks up a little bit on math. Kristalina has just returned from Ukraine, and Kristalina and Odile and I have in common that from the beginning of the full-scale invasion of Ukraine, we were in meeting after meeting, virtual and in person, of the G7 finance community and Ukrainians, reeling with shock, really, and thinking about what could be done. And Kristalina Ukraine is very lucky, and the world is very lucky, that when this terrible thing happened, Kristalina Georgieva was the managing director of the IMF. She is Bulgarian, so she knows what it's like to transform your economy, and she has even a personal family connection to Ukraine, may I say? So her brother was in Kharkiv with her sister-in-law when the full-scale invasion happened, and Kristalina would sometimes show us pictures of him and his wife in a bomb shelter with a little Ukrainian flag. So she understands. She has been there physically from the beginning and kept Ukraine going. She is just back from frozen, dark Kyiv. Kristalina, how is Ukraine, and what needs to happen for it to be a new European tiger?
Let me start by saying dziękuję to the strength of Ukrainians. Ukrainians in the room, can you raise your hand? Ukrainians. I'm full of admiration for your courage, and I feel for the unnecessary, brutal pain imposed on the Ukrainian people for no good reason whatsoever. I am proud of my institution, of the IMF, for stepping up for Ukraine even when we had no policy framework whatsoever to lend to a country in a war. And we worked to make to change our policies so we can support Ukraine, not only with the funding that the IMF directly provides and the reforms we support, but because we serve as an anchor for the friends of Ukraine to have the confidence that they're putting their money in a place where it would make a positive difference. Under the first program of the IMF, we mobilized 150 billion euros. And I'll tell you a small anecdote. So we are in April, after the war started in Washington. We have the spring meetings. And I told the media that Ukraine would need $5 billion a month for as long as the war goes on, so it can have the financial strength to fight. Yes, it needs guns and all the rest, but it also needs an economy that is vibrant. When I gave this interview, people were saying, that's out of the question. What is it? 5 billion a month? Not possible. And some of you probably know Mandela saying, impossible until it is done. Now, you are asking the right question. What would it take for Ukraine to succeed, again, beyond everybody's expectations? It would take three things. Number one, the country has done a lot to reform. Under our program, we had these periodic reviews. We did 8 of them. Mind you, in previous programs of Ukraine with the fund, it was not at all easy. We actually have better outcomes during the war than we had before the war. So reforms have taken place, but they are not completed. And I want to be very frank. If the country wants to be a European tiger, I love this, why a European tiger? European lion. Isn't it better? European lion. Yes. It has to be with no reforms left to be done. So when I look at Ukraine, I understand why, but it is an impediment. We still have electricity, heating, subsidized. They're subsidized for a reason. We know why the country is doing it, but that has to go. We still have, in terms of fiscal position, work to be done. We are right now looking into how we can make the burden sharing of taxation fairer. And it's not an easy thing, but it has to be done. And above all, anything that is an obstacle to private sector dynamism needs to go. I look back at the history of my country, and I can tell you it was very painful. After the euphoria of communism being gone, came the harsh reality that bringing the economy up to par takes a sacrifice. So that is number one. Unfinished business, no more. Number two, it is incredibly important that Ukraine completes the accession to the European Union in a good, rational time frame, because this is a magnet for the Ukrainian economy to truly integrate, fully integrate within Europe, and it is a stamp of approval that you have done it, that Ukraine has done it. Number three, you have to believe in yourself as a lion. So get up in the morning and go, row. Confidence matters. And I'm telling you from my experience, Bulgarian experience, it's not going to be easy. But if you have that confidence and you demonstrate that confidence day in, day out, if you leave aside internal wranglings, if you bury the corpse of corruption forever, of course you're going to succeed. And yes, I know that the two things that would make a difference in business are going to be security and it's going to be labor. I met with business leaders when I was in Kiev, and we looked at surveys, and it's amazing. Some would put access to labor above security as a problem that needs to be solved. So the country, the population shrunk, how we get people back, how we get the best out of those that are there. Unemployment still exists in Ukraine. Why? Because of skills mismatch, how we integrate the people who would come from the army. These are all very practical questions, and you can count that we will be there with you to solve them. My impression from Kiev is very straightforward: cold, dark, much worse than when I was in 23. but functional. Streets are clean, traffic lights work, people do their daily jobs, and they don't moan, they don't complain. And that is incredible. This is why my admiration for Ukraine has only grown after being there. I visited the power plant. Oh my goodness, you know, how can you be so cruel to bomb a power plant in the worst winter and leave people with no heat, leave kids with no chance to go to school? But it was done. And what did Ukrainians do? They didn't moan, they didn't complain. They rolled their sleeves. They restored access to 75% of those that relied on this power plant within 14 hours. It's unbelievable. I asked them how they felt. Do they feel pride of what they have done? And the answer was, well, it's a mixed feeling. We are proud of what we do for our people, but we are frustrated. Why are our skies not protected? And I can tell you, I brought that message loud and clear that this is wrong. There has to be a shield over Ukrainians. To lighten up the conversation, talking about smarts, yes, our kids are smart. So I went to the United States with my daughter in tow. She was 13. So she went to school, to American school. And like 3 weeks later, I was called to the school. And my daughter was very worried. Oh my, you know, because in Bulgaria they call you to school. It's only bad news. So I'm going there. And what was the reason? They said, you know, your daughter is so ahead in math. She is in 7th grade, but we had to move her to 8th grade. And in 8th grade, she's still way ahead. So we have to take her to 9th grade in a different school. These are, they're really smart. And I know we can lift anything that is put on our shoulders. So, best of luck.
Okay. Thank you so much, Kristalina. And Kristalina, as you have seen, in addition to being an incredible force for macro stability in the global economy, is a very inspiring and visionary leader. And she was very clever because she began the conversation by saying, dziękuję, thank you, in Polish. And I think she wanted...
Say it in Ukrainian.
Дякую. But you did it on purpose because of the Polish example. And
I'm not from Poland. They don't like me.
and had once a conversation with Donald Tusk, I think actually at an event at one of Victor's breakfasts. And I said to him, how did Poland do it? It used to be when the Soviet Union collapsed, crossing the border between Ukraine and Poland, not that big a difference. And today, it's huge. So how did the Poles do it? And what now Prime Minister Tusk said is, we decided as a country we were going to do it. And we had a deep national commitment. It was not partisan. It did not depend on the electoral cycle. We knew it was going to be hard. We knew it would be worth it. And we had a sustained effort. So, dziękuję, Kristalina, for pointing that out. And дякую, because, you know, intentionally we began, this is really one of the first big Davos meetings it's the first big one about Ukraine. And we began on purpose about the economy. But as Kristalina pointed out, at the end of the day, there needs to be skies that are protected, a country that is no longer being invaded, a country that is no longer at war. And that is the foundation for everything. Okay, over to Odile. And in these meetings that Kristalina and I were at from the very beginning, Odile was there also in different capacities. Premièrement, avec le ministère des Finances de la France. and now at the EBRD. She now leads an institution that has probably the most specific, directed experience of helping countries in that transition from communism to a flourishing European market economy. It's the whole reason the EBRD exists. I'm old enough to have been there when it was set up to guide this. So I would say to you, Odile, that this coming economic transformation of Ukraine, transformation into a new European lion, maybe we have to say wolf, because are there lions in Europe? Maybe it's wolves. We'll figure out. A test for the group is what's the right animal. Maybe this is the second really big chapter for the EBRD. You did a great job with the accession countries. Can you do the same thing with Ukraine? How are you going to do it? You're on the ground already.
Well, if you like it.
Yeah. I know. No, so, I mean, to start with, you were mentioning the resilience of the country in the military. I think the resilience of the economy is also amazing. And we, since the beginning of the war, we started to invest on our balance sheet. So we had some donor funding, some guarantees, but also we put our own money in investing in Ukraine, and we've increased very substantially our funding. Up to now, we've invested more than $10.5 billion in the countries with donor support. And what is striking is that we have some loan provisioned, we have some non-performing loan because we had a lot of restructuring also with state-owned enterprise and so forth. But the reliability and the repayment from the private sector is there. So we have not made loss in Ukraine. So the private sector businesses, even if they had some infrastructure destroyed, they had some plants destroyed, they start again. They continue to pay you back, and they start again a bit further west, a bit somewhere else, and so forth. But so the resilience is phenomenal. The second point I wanted to make, and EBRD has been very much involved into that, is when you look at the transition of Eastern European countries and Poland. I looked at the figures for Poland. Poland in 1990s at the same level of GDP overall and per capita than Ukraine. Now it's 5 times higher. So it means there is a huge gap, but it also means that this is possible to bridge the gap in 5 times growth of the economy in 30 years. And in that respect, I think one of the key components is, of course, peace and security guarantees, because when you think also about Tiger and what happened in other parts of the world, South Korea, peace, security, guarantee of security and so forth were very strong, and the economy boosted. So that's one key component. But I think also EU accession will be a very strong driver. And I think I know Ukrainians are completely determined that they see that as a core priority, a core driving agenda and so forth. The EU needs to see that also as a blessing in a way, because when you look at the impact on EU growth potential, EU economic dynamics, the enlargement countries, Poland has played a very positive role to boost EU growth potential and growth dynamics, European growth dynamics. And Ukraine can have the same role if only you think about tech and military. And last time I went in Kiev, I visited in a very discreet manner drone factory, and it's amazing to see the capacities, the the innovation, the efficiency, the rapidness of evolution, adjusting to what's going on the ground, on the military ground and so forth. And this is deeply needed in Europe, which needs to step up its military capacity, and we need to rely on Ukraine technology, know-how, expertise and so forth. Then when you look at what will be the key factors and the key enablers for this success story to happen, I think stable macroeconomic environment, rule of law, fight against corruption and so forth. This has already been mentioned, but this will be key. Enabling the private sector to develop, and this requires probably deep market reform. If you think only, for example, in the energy sector, there will be a big need for deep reform, for enabling, I mean, flourishing of private investors. The infrastructure will be key, and there is a huge work to be done. I mean, and in view of what's going on the ground in these days, the cost of rebuilding infrastructure will be, I mean, is increasing by the day, but this will be key. And there also, I think it will be very important to use, of course, I mean, public investment, but also to rely on private investment. We are already working with IFC and the World Bank Group on public-private partnership in port. And there is a huge interest from private investors now in those days on, for example, the Chormosnov port, which is currently on the market. So that could be for port, that could be for aviation, for road, for possibly railway. So a lot of opportunities to develop private investment in this area, which will be key. Housing will be also a key component because, as it was flagged, human capital is probably one of the biggest challenges, and the return from displaced people, but also the reintegration of people who come back from the military. And I think the social dynamics in the country, we will have to be extremely careful and aware about the social dynamics in the countries. People who have been fighting for years in very difficult conditions on the front need to find ways to reintegrate the society, work in business, find works, and so forth. And we already work a lot with reintegration of veterans, with the banking sector, with private sector companies, but this is a key challenge because people come back with trauma, with handicap, and I mean, this will be one of the major challenges, and developing housing for these people will also be needed. The last component I want to flag is the role of the financial sector. Private banks are very solid, remain, I mean, I'm talking under the control of the IMF and Georgiana, but banks are solid, but at the end of the war, they will need recapitalization, in particular in the public sector. State-owned bank will need, I mean, should be privatized. You need to have capital market reform, and we are working on capital market vertical integration so as to allow also capital market funding and so forth. So this is a key component that needs to be prepared and to be now and to be deployed further. So I think it's last comment I want to make is that we've been since the beginning of the war very much focusing on what can be done now, and I think it's still very important to continue to support and provide emergency support, address the urgent challenges and so forth, but thinking about how to prepare and how to already put in place the key components for the reconstruction is very much needed, and that's why I very much appreciate this conversation.
Okay, thank you very, very much, Adil. And I loved everything you said, but I want to just put a highlighter under your point that it is not just about what Europe can do for Ukraine, it's about what Ukraine can do for Europe. And I think part of the big paradigm shift we need to have is to move from thinking about Ukraine as a philanthropic exercise and to seeing Ukraine as a powerful engine for Europe for the reasons you have outlined. And by the way, quite a few people think Europe needs a little more horsepower. So Europe is lucky to have Ukraine. I know. Okay. I'm going to bring in another animal because of Talat's last name. Kachka.
Yeah, so that's this is actually a good example. Yeah, so so someone thinks that we do not rush, but in reality we do our work. Yeah, so that's yeah. But I think that talking about animals, I think that there was an animal that was mentioned already on highest political level by Commission President Ursula von der Leyen. This concept of porcupine. Yeah, so that's the defended Ukraine. So that's I think that this is something where we have consensus that security is important and security also costly. So that our assessment is that if situation is not changing, so that in terms of Russian aggressive behavior towards Europe, so and globally, then it might cost up to 700 billion in next 10 years with maintaining the army that exists now, the same size, and providing military to it. So that's then, of course, and what is
quite interesting is that on the basis of the security consensus, there is also a consensus between the EU and the United States, and the discussion that happened, for example, on 6th of January in Palace Élysée, so in France, that prosperity is also like a pillar of future success. And this is like path dependence, because prosperity depends on security. Other things that our prosperity depends on are reforms, and this is like the word that is too abstract. Yeah, so reforms are that when you like change yourself, and Ukraine is changing herself, so that by defending ourselves, and these changes are not like an office PowerPoint. This is rather repairment of power station. Yeah, so that you have like it's like coal, ice, that's steel, and you repair in order to deliver electricity to people. So that's why, and this is exactly what we are doing. So that's something. What I always highlight is that definitely, that all you are saying is that Ukraine will need to do reforms, but we are doing reforms, sometimes to our own nation. So that this is what we see in Parliament, because Parliament is saying we adopted this anti-corruption law and they are applicable against us. So that's why. How come? Yeah, but I think that this is the bravest thing that politicians can do. That's to apply the laws they adopted to themselves. Yeah. So that's why I think that what happens in Ukraine, the Ukrainian Parliament, is bravest things. But we need to consolidate this, and there is also good consensus of this EU accession. So that EU accession, I have, for the moment, as a Deputy Prime Minister responsible for European integration, all to-do list. It is incredibly long, yeah, so it's like 500 measures on rule of law, 1,000-page table on everything else, yeah, so like statistics, energy, environment, so on. But this list is very complete. And what we discovered is that in majority of these areas, we are on the final miles of these reforms. Even in rule of law, people believe that, we still need to do a lot of things, but in reality, we are at the end of generational reform on rule of law, which started in 2016 with review of our constitution. And last year, we selected several hundred of judges, new judges, selected according to the procedures that are trusted by our partners. This year, it will be another 2,000, even more judges to be selected. So that's why we are advancing here, and we want to consolidate, and that's why EU accession here is a very exact to-do list. Yeah, so that, and definitely we are not starting, so that we really advancing on many areas. Another sort of the last pillar, yeah, so it's about on the future success is access to finances, yeah, and here as well we have a consensus. This is something where what we are working together with Oleksii and our colleagues, together with U.S. government, BlackRock, EU Commission, and some other people, and the circle is evolving about how we see this financial support. And I think that if these three things that where we have consensus will come in like into intuition, so that they are implemented, then I think that we will definitely have all Ukrainian people turn back to Ukraine, because this is like something like a sine qua non for economic transformation. This is also like a part of model, so that we need at least half of the people who left Ukraine to turn back to Ukraine, but preferably all of them, yeah, so that, and maybe not only Ukrainians, but some Europeans, like UK citizens are now moving to Poland, yeah, so that's because it's more attractive, so maybe Ukraine is a destination for all of you. But what is important is that we are serious now, so that we usually, that Ukrainian government is criticized that, that you had a 1 trillion GDP presentation, PowerPoint presentation 2 years ago or 3 years ago and so on. But now what I see is that all of you are absolutely serious. Yeah? It's about actual implementation of all the things. These are not like very, very general thinking, abstract thinking. So, and reforms we are doing are absolutely serious, and no one is questioning this thing. So this scenario is clear, and what is important is that definitely we are not saying that, we are saying about perspective for 10 years, yeah, that's to double GDP in 10 years. But the to-do list is about now. To-do list is about 2026, 2027, to access to the EU as soon as possible if the EU itself is saying that 2028 we can complete negotiations, then it means even they believe that this is feasible. So that's why I think that now we are very close to really deliver this promise to Ukrainian society about the economic prosperity, and it means that we are all serious and we are doing things now. We are not only promising and not only planning. This is something that is happening here and now, and I think that our panel is also perfectly timed, because I think that in the course of this World Economic Forum there will be other events, and I know that it's like slow teaser on this topic, and you will see that this is something that is like really related to the actual processes that happen in Brussels and in Washington and elsewhere, and in Kiev as well. Thank you.
Okay, Tarase, yeah, Krista, yeah. Ukrainians tell means duck. That's why the animal.
I just want to say one thing. Throughout the first program of the IMF, every time I would present what has been achieved, I would start by saying Ukraine has earned every penny of support it receives because it does its part, because it pushes on the anti-corruption front, because it pushes on reforms. And now when we are going with the second program, this is what we want to anchor bringing finances to Ukraine. Ukraine has earned every penny of support it has gotten.
Okay. Okay, Oleksii, no pressure, but now you have to show how Ukraine is going to earn every penny of the money it needs for the renewal. Proszę.
Thank you. Easy. So what I wanted to say is that many points have already been raised. So I think this discussion, whether it's real or not, is exactly how it was said. Like, it's impossible until it's done, right? So both the security and the economic prosperity are interdependent, and through the security that we provide also to ourselves. So here. Some math. So this 700 billion that Taras referred to are kind of off-budget defense expenses, and like the similar amount, like 500 plus across the next 10 years, should come from Ukraine's own budget, which means that the budget should be sufficient enough, right? So how do we do that? Like we can we fight corruption, we increase the white economy, we collect more taxes. But right now, if you look, Ukraine is distributing around 50% of its GDP. So like it, as Kristalina says, like we earn and we do our share, right? So we need to grow economy to be able to sustain security that will allow to grow economy. That's how it's a kind of chicken and egg thing that we need all to be very serious about. And it's endeavor in this like hundreds of billions. And if you put them into one document, and no, like for the next 10 years, yes, of course, it looks like a lot, right? But then this is also real, and if you see what has been achieved, right, you will see that this is feasible, right? Nobody believed this 5 billion a month, like really at the start of the war. We can all really remember that. So like what we need for Ukraine to succeed, as was said before, security first, and it also costs money, like macroeconomic stability, then people returning, and we will need some help with that, and then some help with de-risking instruments, and a lot of the financial instruments that Adil was referring to that will de-risk the first like probably 5 years of investment in Ukraine before investors actually see, okay, you can make profit here, it's working good, and Ukraine is delivering also on its promises of like better business climate. But Russia is not going anywhere, right? So risks in Ukraine will be always higher than in Poland, unfortunately. So like especially for the early investors, we would need this like more de-risking instruments, and also a lot of public investments into infrastructure. If there is no road, or it was destroyed, or like there is a social housing that needs to house workers, if government don't invest there because the government does not have money, it all goes to the defense, then there will be no economic growth and no private sector. So we're trying to combine this all together into one single framework. But like, what about Ukraine? So we're saying, okay, like this is what needs to happen and how much every piece costs and what are the mechanisms to do that. But then Ukraine also takes on its commitments. We're also talk to the reforms. There is no other way to do that just because of the EU accession. So we're going to be doing that and complete it like in the lightning fast time. Nobody kind of believes it now, but as usual, Ukraine will perform. I'm sure about that. But also through like state-owned companies, right? We need to be like we're ready to privatize, but it also involves the seriousness from the other side and some help from financial institutions to finance these deals. So, for example, this Energatom issue, we're ready to sell quarter of the company, but then when we approach different nuclear, like big, powerful companies from Europe, they all have their own troubles and saying, oh, like taking a stake in the like in nuclear, very important company in Ukraine after the war or during the wartime, it's really hard for them because they have their own problems, and we understand it. But it means that there should be a general deal, that it's not just like Ukrainians believe, it's that EU as well, and we all kind of globally believe that it is possible to create new European like powerhouse through Ukraine, and we take our commitment seriously and do this all together. Then for Ukraine, we need to create projects. Everybody is saying, okay, like there is not enough projects for the private sector, right? In which sectors could you utilize like hundreds of billions of additional investments across the next 10 years? So yes, this is real challenge, especially with people that are not present in the country. So people should be returning, we should be retraining them. There's also kind of funds required for that, and then they will be working in some new economy. So like AI hyperscalers, we're discussing this like very extensively across the last half year, and it is actually feasible. We have nuclear, we have a lot of like green energy that could be built. EBRD does a special financial instrument for more like scaling the green energy. So like we can actually do that, and then the capacity for projects will grow, right? But then it's on Ukraine to actually be able, and to Ukrainian businesses as well. So they should take this commitment really seriously, that they need to do projects based on how to attract like European money, Western money, not the like with more compliance standards. And maybe like from the government, we should improve our government capacity. So like it is insane to work in the government right now just because like the war is happening, the international like negotiations are happening all at once, everything, right? But it will never be easy. Like if we're really thinking we're serious about being successful, we need this capacity also in the Ukrainian government, and it's also a task to us. So I think like as you have seen this panel, everybody is ready and everybody is taking this very, very seriously. So we need to like last mile to close the deal, agree, and then very, very hard work for the next 10 years to actually deliver all that. So that's easy. Thank you.
And Oleksii understates the challenge of the craziness of working in the government. I've been having, leading up to Davos, efforts at conference calls with Oleksii and Taras, and very often they have no power. And so you can't do a call if you have no power and your phones haven't been charged. And so I have this vision of them sitting in their cold, dark offices or cold, dark apartments, desperate that their phones have run out of power, madly trying to do the 1,000 things that they have to do for the European acquis. It is always challenging.
It's not so dramatic, but yes.
Especially for you. Yeah. I love your point, although I disagree with it, that nobody believes Ukraine can do this for Europe. I'll tell you who does believe it. Ukrainci.
Yeah,
Ukrainki.
that's true.
And Ukraine really is Ukrainians are the only people in the world who have shown that they are actually prepared to die because they want to be European. Yeah. There's no more powerful commitment than that. And they're doing it they're fighting in such a smart way. So that, I think, past performance is not a guarantee of future performance, but it's a pretty good sign. We have a few minutes left. I wonder if there are any comments or questions. Yes? Okay. Why don't we take 3 comments and questions right away, then we'll go to our great speakers.
Thank you. Mark John from Reuters. Just a quick question to Managing Director Georgieva, first of all. When do you expect to be in a position to release the first funds from the new program? And I guess the kind of the counterpart question to that is for Ukrainian officials. What do you consider to be the most realistic options for near-term budget financing in the meantime?
Okay, we'll do 2 more questions so we can, and then we'll wrap.
Can I go ahead? Ken Choi from Joseon Daily Newspaper, South Korea. My question is a fatigue issue. I'm a journalist, so from day one, I engineered my newspaper to support Ukraine, and then Russians harassed us and whatever, and our newspaper runs Asian Leadership Conference, so we invited Prime Minister Severdenko twice. Mrs. Zelenska came to Korea for Asian Leadership Conference. So I sort of mobilized Koreans to support Ukraine because, and still today, I still believe that Ukraine can do it. You know, I have no doubt in my mind, as President Banga said, you know, Ukrainians have the willness and all the spirits to be able to, you know, resurrect the country's economy and so on. But, you know, the rest of the world is in sort of a fatigue, meaning like, you know, President Trump came in, the Korean government changed, and Europeans seems to be more interested in Greenland, you know, Americans are more interested in Venezuela and so on. So, you know, the tension on Ukraine is, you know, sort of going down on the level. And my question to the panelists and maybe Mr. Kashka, you know, help me how I can revive this fatigue, overcome this fatigue issue.
Okay, very good. One more. Maybe we'll do 2 more. Please.
Thank you. Hello. I have a question for Taras, the Vice Minister. Why were 11 political parties suspended or banned in Ukraine? Why is that?
Oh, okay.
And how does it help the democratic rules?
Hello, I'm Ksenia Smirnova from Ukrainian television. I have 2 questions, one for Oleksii and one for Mrs. Kristalina. Very shortly, Oleksii, I want to ask you if there any opportunity to make tender counter effects with the question of not very easily situation with the tax tax changes in Ukrainian, according to Ukrainian government, towards middle and towards small business, because it may be a little bit harmful. It's easily saying harmful. And the second thing is about some pressure that might be during an accord for the martial law now in Ukraine towards business, especially middle and small business. So how to cope with this now with the help of our foreign partners. And for Ms. Kristalina, we are talking about reconstruction, but my question as a journalist during all these years of war is, maybe we should talk really about reinventing of Ukraine's economy, because it was very hard question even during the time period when the war started in 2014, that we are losing a lot of sectors of economics because of this long-distance war, and now we have completely destroyed regions in Ukraine. So should we really reconstruct, or should we start this dialogue about reinventing of Ukraine's economy? So the question is what the form of this economy might be in this modern future, us in Europe as Ukrainians, and who will start and make this dialogue now, not after war? Will Ukrainian society or representatives of group of society, or you, the people who really help us stay alive, even though you are saying the terrible things that are going on right now, this minute in Ukraine? Thank you very much.
Okay, дуже дякую. And we're now going to have to wrap up. So what I'm going to do is give each panelist an opportunity to answer questions, make a concluding remark, and we'll go in the same order that we started. So I'll start with AJ. And I think you have something directly to say to our final question from the Ukrainian journalist about reinventing the Ukrainian economy.
In my opening remarks, I talked about the need to think about reinventing and take this as an opportunity to turn the page and think about an economy that is driven by technology, data, AI, that stuff, but also driven by Ukraine's blessing of natural resources and then driven by the private sector. But the important thing is for the Ukrainian people to own it and take it forward. I just want to make one point in addition to this. I think the privatization of state-owned enterprises, to Oleksii's point, is going to be very important. The question will be, are you going to get privatization at 25%? Or do you need to think about privatization where the private owner gets a higher amount in the beginning and Ukraine keeps a substantial ownership so you can get the upside of when that company is doing better post the war? And I think that's an interesting angle that we're going to have to think our way through as the next few months go by.
Yeah, excellent point. Okay, Kristalina.
First on to the question when we expect to go to our board of directors with a new program. It will be in matters of weeks, not months. We do have some actions that are prior actions for going to board to be completed. When I went to Kiev, I went, among other things, because I wanted to be sure that something that was agreed in November is fully ready to go. And not surprisingly, as everybody here knows, with the anticipation of peace, there is dynamics in Ukraine that requires calibration of this, not all, but some of these prior actions. I must say that many of the difficult prior actions have been implemented. A budget was passed, and that was very difficult. The labor law that is critical for the economy has been presented, and it is advanced. And I'm fully confident that we are finding the right path for completion of prior actions so we can go to our board of directors. And I got that sense that, are there any members of parliament in the audience?
Not yet.
Not yet. They're coming. But when faced with this, can we have an anchor for the support for Ukraine? Everybody in the parliament, in the government, and I hope in society understands that an IMF program is not just the 8.1 billion that we would commit from the IMF. It is an anchor for the 90 billion from the European Union, and therefore we must move forward decisively, and that I am confident this is going to happen. To the very interesting question on how the economy can be reinvented. Well, so here is my reaction to it. Part of what needs to be done is just to finish what was started. Ukraine stepped on the road to a market economy, but hasn't quite finished going on this road. And it cannot linger in between non-market economy and market economy. It is either or. It's like you cannot be half pregnant. But then you look into the future. Who are your partners? How you position yourself in a global economy that itself is changing dramatically. And you say, we have this unique opportunity to do things anew. And we can turn this into a strength. And I want to praise Ajay, who took very much to heart exactly the answer to this question, how to revamp the Ukrainian economy for prosperity of the people in the country, and actually for the benefit of Europeans and everybody who is in economic relations with you.
Okay, Odile.
On fatigue, I don't think, I mean, economic strengths. I mean, the agribusiness, it's very traditional, but it's a big strength you need to rely on to revamp, to transform, but you need to build on that. You need to build on the manufacturing capacities. You need to build on the tech capacities, AI, the defense will be a key part of the recovery. And so I think that it's transforming. It's not, I mean, throwing away all the key strengths, but really building upon them. And there is a last point I wanted to mention in terms of what appears to me a key strength in moving forward and the recovery and the reinvention of the country is the role of civil society. I think since 2014, and we've seen that in, this summer when there was some discussion about the anti-corruption law and so forth, the role of the civil society and the feeling of ownership for what's going on in the country is huge, and it will be a key component of the success of Ukraine in the years to come.
Okay, Tarase.
Yeah, so first and foremost, just to continue, this is exactly the one of examples that I want to use about invention and reinvention of economy. So agriculture, in 2008, we exported 4 million tons of grains. In 2018, it was 40, and before the war, so 2021, it was around 80. Yeah, and now we permanently export really 60 million tons, even during war. We've blocked ports, with all these things. Then the defense industry, it is invented itself with all these drones. What is digital economy? It is invention in itself. This is not something that we inherited from anybody. So that's why there are a lot of examples that Ukrainian economy, it means Ukrainian people, Ukrainian society, have curiosity, knowledge, willingness, interest to develop themselves. This is the energy that will be used by all financial institutions and businesses and investments to bring prosperity. So that's why Ukraine is really invented itself constantly and permanently. That's why we believe in our own future. And there is no sense of fatigue anywhere. I think that what really happens is that there is a very profound change in our cooperation with our partners. In the 2022 first months of war, all support was urgent, like this discovery that we need $5 billion US monthly of support, that we need some humanitarian support, etc. It works now as well, so that the most recent initiative of Polish citizens to collect money to bring generators to Ukraine, it means that there is a sense of urgent support to Ukrainian society among a lot of societies. But after 4 years of war, and this war is really last longer than Second World War, so we think about strategic change, yes, about thinking about how we can invest like in 10 years, how we can implement reforms that works for decades. So that's why it's not a fatigue. This is a change in partnerships for the good. So it's more serious, more advanced, more ambitious, and more coherent as well. And last but not least, that despite 4 years of war, we maintain democratic society. You mentioned civil society organizations, media freedom. What is possible under martial law? And your questions about parties is also a good example of it. We have 377 political parties registered in Ukraine. And indeed, some of them are decided to praise Russian aggression. They decide to praise aggression against ourselves, so that it goes beyond political order. So that's why we maintain democratic heart of Ukrainian society alive and evolving, even in the circumstances of martial law. Thank you.
Okay, I've been a terrible moderator because we're 7 minutes over. So Oleksii,
Just 7.
Really fast.
60 seconds.
Yeah, so
other people are waiting.
I think on the budget question, there's IMF program coming. There's 19 billion that we're discussing with EU. We have, by the way, the highest ever in the history of Ukraine national bank resources right now. So I think we're very much on track. On the fatigue issue, I think, look, the same people that are building rockets that kill Ukrainians and they send people killing Ukrainians are the same people that aiming the same rockets into South Korea. it's somehow like it got connected with Russia, so the North Korea is there. So we think like we know how to fight it, right? So kind of cooperating on this together to bring more security to your country and to our country, I think is the best big example. And like doing so in defense sector, in industrial sector, so with Korean companies, I think the best. And maybe on the reinvention of the economy. So I'm just back from Berlin. From Saturday, we had Grüne Woche there, a huge agriculture kind of exhibition.
Agricultural Davos, yes.
Yes, yeah. So basically last year, and we had a big meeting between Ukrainian agriculture organizations and German ones, and German farmers. And last year they were like fighting like against one another. This year, not so. Like farmers saying, we support Ukraine. We see that we need to go to these markets together. Let's work together to be more beneficial to both Germany and Ukraine. And I think that's the cooperation that we seek, and it's possible.
And beautifully, we end with agriculture and animals. So perhaps we end with the Ukrainska korova.
This is zoo democracy.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you, Kristalina. Yes, yes.
Thank you, Kristalina.